to $60 million annually. I think that's justified. I think he should get paid more, Kunal. I'm going to sign a petition to get him a $100 million a year contract because that sort of a move, that's not a memory for today or a week or a month. This is stuff that we're going to be telling our kids, and they're going to be telling their kids, and they're going to be telling their kids about. Max Verstappen schooled Oscar Piastri, and this is revenge served cold from Saudi Arabia. And this is the best driver in the world being the best driver in the world. I think this is just what a perfect motor race should be all about. What a race Imola was.
What a race. What an opening lap. What a mega mastermind masterclass move into turn one. You guys remember we actually thought of these scenarios. We said
Yeah.
what happens to the race will be defined by what Max Verstappen decides to do, what sort of Max Verstappen decides to show up, right? And my goodness, when was the last time Max had such a clean opening lap move that he did not go for it. Yes. When was
We'll
the
tell
last time
you
he had?
because
Yeah. Okay.
this is what Sundaram and I were discussing. Sundaram told me Qatar 2024 when he got past George Russell very easily and then shut the door on Lando. And then I think Sundaram, you also recommended Mexico 21 where he got past Bottas, Hamilton, and Checo to go from P4 to P1. So I mean, I'm building it up saying it's a very big deal, but he's done this so often, Sundaram.
He's done it so often, and but suddenly we've not seen a lot of this recently, and a lot of it has also been a little scrappy. There's been a little bit of wheel banging and stuff going off track and everything. But this was the beauty of this pass was that it wasn't there. It really wasn't. No one really anticipated that he's going to be going for it, and he really created the chance and went really clean. So everyone was baffled by the fact that he was P3 going into the corner, but at the end of it, he was leading the race, and I think that was the race defining move that eventually went on led to him winning the race.
One sec. You guys are saying he's pulled this off often, right? What do you mean often? Is once a season often? Is once every few races often? Because what's been the narrative often off late, okay, is that Max has been pushing the limits. Max has been wheel banging. Max has been either driving off track or driving others off track. But this is the Max Verstappen we all love, don't we? Who is able to pull off such a stunning move when he knew that, everyone knows the minute you're in clean air, you have a different race running. Oscar Piastri said, I don't know what my pace would have been like in clean air. There you go. And I actually did this analysis on Viaplay, and I'm very happy to explain that, here on the podcast as well. Firstly, Max had wheel spin, so he was bogged down. Second, there was a headwind into turn one, which meant that Oscar Piastri was punching a hole through to everyone else, which is why George Russell, who was in his wheel tracks, was getting a beautiful toe, so much that George Russell could have actually taken the lead of the race. Okay, which is why Oscar Piastri did not pull out absolutely wide on the normal racing line because he thought, you know what, George could just sneak it in, and then whoever has the inside line usually has the lead of the race. Well, that's what didn't happen because Oscar had the inside line, but it was Max Verstappen who took that outside line. And my goodness, when Max went in there, I said, that's it. These two are going to collide mid corner, apex of turn two, and end of the race for both of them. Okay. But Oscar gave through. He actually said pre-race to David Coulthard on the Viaplay show as well that even if I'm not leading after turn one, I still am confident about leading this race and winning it.
Well,
Yeah. So my question to you guys is, do you guys think that Oscar was maybe a little complacent? Maybe he was caught napping at turn one? Or
yes.
maybe he just realized, oh my goodness, this is who Max Verstappen really is.
Yeah, I think I honestly feel Sundaram he underestimated what Max Verstappen could do. And Verstappen, as Alex Brundle explained wonderfully on his analysis in F1 TV, he left Oscar Piastri a compliment because he got so close and he believed that Oscar wouldn't understeer into him, which is a great sign of respect. But I think that's when Oscar also realized, wow, this guy is Max Verstappen. And we saw that. I mean, we saw after Jeddah that Oscar Piastri has the composure to nail these moments. And I genuinely thought that he had Max's number because he passed him in Jeddah. He got the better of him in Miami. And I thought, wow, finally someone who can take it up to Max. But we forget how good this guy's judgment is. I think this is the perfect way to seal off Red Bull Racing's 400th race win. And Max Verstappen actually now has more than 50% of Red Bull Racing's race wins. It's crazy.
See, that's the thing with Max Verstappen, and if you've watched him racing in this last decade, if you at any point get his number, anticipate payback soon enough. Okay, so if Piastri's had the better of Verstappen in Jeddah or in a couple of other races, payback was inevitable, and he served it hot and fresh today. And I think only Piastri would know what was really running in his mind. But like Kunal explained, Russell had a much better start. He was in the toe of Piastri, and he was quicker than Max. So probably it was fair for Oscar to keep his focus on Russell and not giving him enough space to get past. Where he probably must have disregarded Max is further behind. I don't need to worry about him because it's a narrow track. The first corner is also very narrow, and there's gravel at the end of it. So I don't think so. Max is going to be trying what he did in Jeddah. Surely he's not going to be doing that. So probably yes, he was caught napping and he braked way earlier, which suddenly opened up a window for Max, and he thought, I might as well go for it.
And truth be told, Max was actually third.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was third entering turn one, the braking zone, etc. He was third. If you draw a line from Russell's front wing, Max is actually behind. So Oscar was also right in trying to block off George because he said, okay, George has taken Max, so I don't have to deal with him. Only to realize that everyone had to deal with that Max. I mean, Max drove what he called the normal racing line, which is so true, and that's why he could carry more speed into those corners and so on. But guys, I have to ask you this: was Red Bull Racing the quickest car this race weekend? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Lando believes. And
What do
I
you
was
believe,
very.
Samuel?
No, I want to bring in what Lando says first because I think it's a very interesting statement. He said that even if he was on pole today, Max would have still won. And that could be
Hmm.
interpreted in two ways. Firstly, I don't like the sound of that. It generally doesn't come
No,
across.
did he say that? Did he
He
say
said
that
that.
if
He said that.
Lando was on pole, Max would have won?
And Lando said that even if I was
Oh,
on pole, he would have won. So it's I don't like the sound of that
okay.
statement firstly. And when I read that, I was like, has he really said that? He did really say that. But that also then plays into what I believe because I think that last stint was characteristic of it all, genuinely, Kunal, because I thought, okay, Lando, 5 laps, 5 seconds. Now is when we find out just how good that McLaren is. And the gap increased. It didn't cut down. I think they finished at what, 6.6 seconds or something towards the very end with Lando in clean air. Sure, Lando must have taken off a decent bit while trying to get past Oscar. But nonetheless, that McLaren, which is apparently a god at managing tires, wasn't quite looking like a god anymore. So it doesn't matter if Red Bull were the fastest or not. Given the circumstances, they just weren't quick enough to capitalize on Red Bull's. Sorry, McLaren weren't just quick enough to capitalize on Red Bull and whatever they had over there, and that to
But
me
but but
was
but
alarming.
Samuel, was Red Bull the quickest car? You still haven't answered that. Yes or no?
Well, on an average, no, but
But
Max
today,
Verstappen is the best driver.
today.
I would say I actually go with Sundaram. And here's some stat. Okay, Max Verstappen before the safety car actually neutralized the race was 18 seconds
Yeah.
ahead of P2, which was Lando Norris. Okay, now here's what was happening on the radio channel. GP and Max were tracking Lando Norris's lap times to the 10th of a second every single lap. Okay,
Which is what they should do.
yeah, but they were. But my point is, yes, they do that, but they were actually mapping it, saying how much time are we losing to Lando? Is Lando pulling away? And my guess is the upgraded Red Bull, along with the slightly cooler conditions, even though it was warmer than usual in Imola. And the upgrades brought in Miami and Imola have sort of brought Red Bull into play. Red Bull were also running a little more wing this race weekend, so maybe that helped as well. So my point is, Red Bull has taken a step forward in performance. Okay, at least in Imola, at least for the kind of corner ranges we had and the tarmac and whatever else you call it. And then, of course, there's Max Verstappen also being able to extract from from such a strong package. So that was one. And then the second stint where he pulled 6.6 seconds. Okay, GP actually went and told Max, you won on merit, you proved your point, which was his way of saying back off. But guess what Max was doing? He wasn't backing off. Okay. So I am of this opinion that Max Verstappen was actually the quickest driver in the quickest car today around Imola, especially in clean air, or even if I remove clean air out of the equation, I tend to sort of agree with Lando that maybe Max could have won against Lando, but could Max have won against Oscar? I don't think so. Maybe that would have been a far more even fight because Oscar just seems more comfortable in this McLaren than Lando.
Yeah, and the other thing that we saw from qualifying is Max actually had the fastest, the top speed, um,
Yeah.
in the qualifying sessions. I think it was on 339, and the McLarens were at the bottom of it, 331, 333. So there was already a significant difference on straight line speed. And that also probably contributed to the fact that they were not able to close the gap on Max. The eventual winning margin is just 6 seconds, but it would have been a lot bigger if not for those safety car interventions and in between. So McLaren just didn't have an answer to what Max was able to do with that car today, and quite clearly. And I think this also probably has to, and the narrative also has to end that Red Bull are the third or the fourth fastest car. Quite clearly, we've seen that over these 7 races that it's definitely the second, or worst case, sometimes the third, not the fourth quickest car. That car has pace. The upgrades are working. And if you remember, last year Imola was actually where Red Bull's problems began with, slow rotation. They were struggling at Imola, and Norris was catching up to him. So now it's a flip story, or it's how the story has developed through the last 1 year, and the Red Bulls seem pretty strong today.
And
And
just
go
one
ahead,
more
go ahead.
point. Yeah. Again, narrative, social media, Max pitted under the virtual safety car, got lucky. And again, I said this on the TV show, and I'm going to repeat it again for a larger audience because the TV show is restricted to Norway and the Norwegian audiences, right? Max was able to run a pace that allowed him to go on to lap 29, that allowed
Yeah.
him to extend his stint. He was managing his tires, he was managing, race management as we call it. So he was there to make the most of that lucky break. Yes, when a VSC pit stop happens, it is luck, but you've got to be in the right place at the right time to extract that luck. And that's what Max Verstappen was able to do. 14 minutes in, and we are still talking Max Verstappen because that's how fantastic the race was today. Absolute masterclass, as we love to call it on the Inside Line F1 podcast.
Oh,
Oh, we
sorry.
will still continue to do so. Oh, you were saying?
No, I was saying this was the first race win for Franz Hermann. Isn't that the case? I don't know
Yeah.
why we're referring to him as Max Verstappen throughout the first 14 minutes.
Yeah, Max Verstappen retired when his daughter was born. This is Franz Hermann now. This is different. No, but we will still continue to talk about Max Verstappen because I'm not done yet with that start. Uh, Again, looking at back at the replays, his positioning was perfect. Russell had a great getaway. Verstappen could well have gone extremely to the outside line, which I didn't notice initially while commentating on the race. I just watched the replay and then watched Alex Brundle talk about it, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, fair point." He put his car perfectly so that Russell couldn't slide past and sort of snake his way past into P1, and also that Lando Norris had no space on the outside. That is excellent positioning. And Verstappen, immediately after getting the getaway, was constantly looking left and in his mirrors to see where everyone was. That level of detail while driving is unbelievable. And as you mentioned, Kunal, that extended stint, while on the broadcast, we were all constantly analyzing when are they going to box? Are they making a mistake? Because every single lap, he was consistently, I remember, 3.5, 4 tenths slower than Oscar Piastri. But in the long run, Piastri was losing time because he had so many cars to pass. And I was surprised. It's like the overtakes were looking phenomenal. And it's beautiful for the highlight reel. But eventually, they really got bogged down by that. And I'm genuinely a believer that the race would have been closer, if not. I mean, I'm not sure about the result being different, but it definitely would have been closer if McLaren hadn't boxed that early. I'm still confused, Kunal. Like, why did they box on lap 12? Even Carlos Sainz says that when they did that, it felt wrong to him. And that's why
Very,
he's finished
very,
far
yeah,
later.
very interesting. Abhishek is here. He's joined the live chat. And he's asked the same question. A word on McLaren's strategy during the safety car stops. Could they have pitted Oscar 2 or at least put Lando ahead by team orders to immediately chase after Max? So let's break it down because several points. You also raised a point. Why did they pit Oscar early? Truth being told, Oscar said he was struggling, and at that point of time in the race, degradation early in the race was still very high, which is why George Russell said he couldn't meet the target lap time at that pace. When Russell pulled the trigger, Carlos Sainz pulled the trigger because the undercut was supposed to be very strong. And Piastri realized that that's it. I'm not able to, manage my tires as well. So McLaren's tire degradation, which has typically been one of their strengths, as both of y'all were saying, was not as much of a strength this race weekend, which will also be something that will concern them as well. But truth be told, they just had to pit at that time. And then, to Abhishek's point, could they have pitted Oscar too? Well, Oscar did not have tires remaining because he had used up his tires, just like Charles Leclerc as well. So it was just down to tire allocations and what was available to each driver at that time, which is why PS3 was actually on much older tires behind, Max Verstappen. And I'm actually glad they did not use team orders, even though in the end they sort of said they did. That's what Zach Brown said. We took a decision as a team. And I would say for Oscar Piastri, with a 24 race calendar, with so much pace that he's shown, to go away with a badly managed race by the pit wall and in the cockpit, if we were to call it that, to go away with a podium is still fantastic.
No, but I think we have to call a spade, Sundaram, because we criticize Lando Norris a lot for his mistakes. I think Oscar deserves a bit of it too. That just wasn't it at the start. And also the race management, Lando was able to manage his tires a lot better. So let's just call a spade a spade. If we call out Lando, we need to call out Oscar too. Sure, decent result, but clearly there is a bit of work to do.
No, of course, and this all comes with experience, and especially at a track where you don't have a lot of opportunities to kind of claim the race. I think everyone knew that the driver who takes the lead of the race after the first corner has the advantage to literally win the race, and Oscar would have known that this is possibly the only chance. So yes, he was caught napping, and probably this is also inexperience coming into play. And then, like you said, Verstappen positioning the car perfectly in that regard. I'm also looking at the lap times right now, but I'm not really sure if Piastri was really struggling a lot in terms of degradation. If you look at Russell was losing literally half a second, or in some cases more than a second, from lap 7 up until lap 12, where he pitted. But Piastri was losing probably 3 tenths, 4 tenths, and it didn't even seem a lot. So I'm not really sure if they jumped the gun to kind of defend against a Leclerc and kind of lost sight that their main challenger was Max up ahead. I don't know if they got spooked by Leclerc's pit stop, him being in clear air, and if his lap times being at least half a second quicker. So I'm not sure if that was the right thing for them to do, which again goes back to McLaren's strategy. Is this where they're little conservative, little defensive? Should they have, really been confident, like how Red Bull does it? Oscar pitted, they really didn't react to that. They said, okay, we're going to stick to our plan. We're going to go long, because I think Tsunoda started on the hards, right? So they were getting information on how long the hards can run. And accordingly, Max had to tweak or run according to that, this thing. But yeah, the question once again on, yeah. So today, I think Piastri dropped it a little, and McLaren also to some extent in terms of strategy.
Yeah. And I want to discuss what happened towards the end as well. So, on the live broadcast, we didn't have a lot of information. And I'll be honest, I needed to take some time off from the race to understand, which is why now this question is coming in my head about what McLaren's decision was towards the end. I didn't fully catch it, Kunal. What did McLaren decide? Did they decide to just keep them as is? And I call it quite a quandary for them. Like, do they prioritize the championship leader or the car that's faster in the moment? What does papaya rules really mean at that point in time? Because some might say, some might say that they could have probably cost themselves a shot at a race win, quite like Suzuka, where they didn't let the faster car
Yeah.
go ahead and have a fair shot. Is that
The
true?
only the okay. Firstly, I maybe I'm wrong, but papaya rules usually come in when Lando Norris has to swap with Oscar Piastri, not the other way around. At least not in 2025. I'm just saying it as it is. Is that true? Of course, maybe not. Also, this was a different scenario than Suzuka because Max was still way ahead. In Suzuka, he was half a second ahead. Here, he was 4 5 seconds ahead. So not really something that I believe none of the McLaren drivers could make an inroad. So eventually they just decided to swap the drivers or
Could
tell
they not if
Piastri.
Lando had much faster tires, though, which clearly was the case?
But again, like we said at the start of the show, I think it was Red Bull that was the quickest car. So whatever it is that they would have done, it would have been a 2-3 finish only. I don't believe they had the pace to go challenge Max Verstappen.
But just give it a shot. Like just I don't know, just
They
just to
they
prove
did
the
no they
hypothesis right.
they they did they did let Lando through, and then we saw what happened after that. So I believe that it was just how the pace of each team and each driver and each car was. But let's agree on one thing, which I know you guys will, that this 1-2-3 finish that we had has actually bunched up the top three in the drivers' championship even more, because Oscar Piastri has lost points to both his nearest rivals. He's only 13 points ahead of Lando, and Lando's, I think, 9 points ahead of Max. Can you imagine? Max in the second or the third fastest car, except for Imola, okay, is only 22 points away from the lead of the Drivers' Championship. I mean, my goodness, this season is going to go down in the history of history books as well, because that's how well Max Verstappen has been. And you know, can we can we move shift tack or tack to Williams,
I
or do you
don't
want to
want
guys?
to. I still want to talk about Max, but I mean, I had a question about whether he's turning out to be the best individual driver performer in the history of Formula One. It reminds me of Schumacher in the late 1990s, and uh, I mean, I can't think of anyone else who's been that good individually as a driver, like just outclassing the field. But I get a feeling this will lead into a 20-minute discussion. So you can let us know what you think about it in the live chat. We should then move on to Williams because we.
I'll take 1 minute. I'll take 1 minute. See, if you look at the last 11 races, Max Verstappen has the most points of all drivers, 199.
No.
199. I think Lando Norris is second, 192. So this starts from that Sao Paulo Grand Prix, the one that he infamously won. So since then, Max has the most points, 199. Then comes Lando. The second Red Bull driver in all of these 11 races has accumulated 9 points. Okay, and we recently spoke about this in terms of how closely the second driver qualifies to Max, which is never really the case, or at least just 30% of the races, which just goes on to show that Max really is driving solo in all of the races. He doesn't get the benefit of having a cushion behind him, but the other way where they're using the second driver is putting him on the alternate strategy, like what we saw from Tsunoda today, at least getting tire data, if not really helping closer to him. That's the only way where the second driver is really helping him. But in terms of points, they're not pulling in a lot. I think Lance Stroll has scored more points in those 11 races, 14, which puts a big question mark on what's really happening in that second seat. But yeah, now let's move to Williams.
I still want to talk about Max.
Okay,
Okay.
let's move on.
Williams. Okay, where do we go from here? I'll start with my personal favorite first because I just want to get the disappointment out of the way. Even though Williams accumulated a total of 14 points this weekend, if I'm not correct, if I'm not wrong,
No,
I think it's still.
the most this year. The most this year.
I still feel it's a bit of a disappointment because that's what my favorite driver, Carlos Sainz, said. He said that the communication wasn't perfect and we didn't quite execute the race as well as we should have. And of course, they got caught out a little bit by that strategy because they boxed on lap 12. VSC came in and it messed up with everyone's race, whoever boxed earlier. But the point being, this comes across as
Also,
a.
just to add, they boxed early, but James Vowles actually at that point said the tire degradation was extremely high early parts of the race. So when they decided to call a two-stopper for Carlos Sainz, it was actually the right decision. It's just that the tires eased off as the race progressed, which was very strange and very peculiar for Imola. But yes, I just had to say that because I love that Williams is able to give such a beautiful, especially James Vowles, such a beautiful explanation of what their decision making was
Hmm.
at different parts of the races. Because inadvertently, I think that the top five teams actually had all drivers split on tire strategy, just because Russell went early, Carlos Sainz went early, Leclerc went early, Piastri went early. So it wasn't team splitting choices. It's just that their hands were forced because Russell just went early and pulled the trigger on everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And that just sort of put Sainz in an awkward little spot. Like he wasn't progressing